Really happening around. Hey, good to see you, Peter. I haven't shaken your hand. It's lovely to see you. Lovely to see you, Scotty and Michelle as well, and everybody else. It's superb. Great to be here, and on a big day. I've already said to many people I've enjoyed a run this morning in Timaru, and when the sun's coming up in the east, it's superb. Right. Just would be useful to keep going. I know folk are probably keen to find out what my plans are, which is to try and make certain that we're through the public session before we break for lunch. And I've been told lunch is with us by 11:30, so we can see where we go. I do want to make one change to the agenda, which is item 6.8. We are receiving the auditor's report on last year and the open items. I'm going to move that to the end of public, so sort of draft timing 11:30 this morning, although Trudy, I understand you've got John, I'm going to say on a leash, that's a terrible phrase, you've got him ready to text and bring him in as and when needed, which would be superb. So John Mackey, our auditor, will join us for that. Other than that, I think the agenda is very much as I want to take it. So look, welcome everybody. I will formally open the meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee and just want to note a couple of matters. So firstly, Ahmed, welcome. I think this is your first meeting with us. I've spoken to you a couple of times on Teams, and it's wonderful to have you on board. And indeed, the set of papers you've fitted in seamlessly as far as I can see, and I'm grateful that you've already put a lot of hard yards into what can make for a very effective meeting, so I appreciate that. Trudy, you said 10 days to go. You're not allowed to go until I've got an audit opinion. That's simple fact, okay? I don't care when that comes, but you'll still be here. No, look, all seriousness, Trudy. Again, thank you. It feels like, if I be blunt, too short a time here at Timaru, but for the time that you have, thank you for the hard yards. And you heard my exasperation, particularly around the annual report, and you and Andrea have done great things, and we'll hear a bit more about that as we go on. But more generally, thank you for what you've brought to the committee as a whole. And I'm sure your colleagues will say that in other ways, in different ways, in about 10 days' time. So thank you also, Trudy. I look forward to seeing you in Invercargill. It'll be nice to see you down there. You're not lost to the sector, which is really, really superb. In fact, do I have any apologies? Folk can stay till the end, the bitter end, Michelle, we're okay there? Yeah, that's good, rightio. No apologies, there's no urgent business, although I just told you a rough change in it. Matters of a minor nature, haven't been informed of any. Are there any matters coming up that folk need to declare a conflict of interest or potential conflict? No, we're good, thank you. Yeah, Peter, standard?
Just in aspects of it, Environment Canterbury
yep.
do get mentioned.
No, thank you for that. I think that's worthwhile noting.
Well,
I appreciate that.
Make any comments in relation to any of that.
Yeah, that's probably particularly relevant to the PX items.
Absolutely.
Cracker. Thanks, mate. Rightio. Thank you for, and we'll note that, please, Jess. It's important that we do that. Can we move to the minutes, please, of our last meeting on the 3rd of July. I'll move from the chair. They're taken to the true and correct record. Over a seconder, please. Thanks, Nigel. Are there any matters of accuracy or completeness that you need to raise? No? Brilliant. Can I just check one point? On page 13, the third recommendation under fraud and corruption was a report back from the Chief Fraud Officer and commentary on how officers can speak up. I just want to check what we mean by officers. Is that all staff? It is taken, yeah, officers is taken as all staff. I just realised, I think I added that on, can I say? And I just wanted to make certain that that means all staff. We'll come back to it when we look at Ahmed, your corruption policies and plans, but my intent there was that all staff know and are encouraged to speak up if that's appropriate. But if it's Officers generally, it's an older form of word. We staff, I just wanted to check. That's good. Anything else then that people would like to raise?
Yeah, Bruce, just on the next page,
Yep.
it says, and part of the resolution was that management expands on the emergency management risk and reports back to the committee. Has that been done? Because I couldn't see anything here.
No, I don't think so. We'll bring that up when we get to the next item, which is the item which is under action points, because there are a couple that I think I would like to raise a point on as well. So if you just hold that, please, that would be great. Any other points? Being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Loud, bold, clear voice, please. This thing up here needs to pick you up. That's great. Rightio, can we move to the work program? Ahmed, welcome. Is there anything you want to say about the work program at this stage?
For the work program, it will be the same. The only two different we have a meeting on 24th of October for Audit New Zealand reports. This is point number one. Point number two, which is a change in the insurance renewal. There was a report in November. Now it's moved to March. We have a strategic insurance report 6.5, which explains the work needed to be done. That's what explains why we have to move it till March.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So the critical thing is getting Trudy. Sorry, back to you again, aren't I? The clearance of the annual report, which is hopefully a short meeting, with the intention that our role as a risk committee is to clearly recommend to council that the annual report can be adopted. And what is the date of the meeting for the actual council meeting? Somewhere between the 24th and the 31st, right?
I understand it's the 31st,
Okay.
or I will double check that.
Don't worry, there's at least two other meetings on the 31st I know of that are occurring, my commitments that relate to adopting the annual report. Yes, Pete?
Yeah, well, we're intending, because it's a Tuesday and we normally meet on a Tuesday, so...
yeah,
that
so
was,
31st, yeah.
No, yeah, that's, and of course that's the last possible day.
Yeah, so. I mean, sorry, I wasn't sort of really frowning at the idea of the 31st, because in reality, the 24th becomes really important from an audit process perspective in that sense. So I think that's what we need to help everybody focus on. And if the 24th goes fine, the 31st is a breeze. I hope, Janice. Also gives us a slight insurance. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you, Ahmed. Appreciate that. So the recommendation is that we receive and note the program. I'll move that from the chair to a seconder, please. Thank you, Peter. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Right, so now we come to the action points, I think. Am I up to? Again, Ahmed, please.
For the action point, we have from previous 1, 2, 3.
Page 23.
Five points, so most of them are closed. The only one is point number 3, which is strategic risk management update. There was 3 action points. So the first 2 actions already applied in the strategic risk update. It will be shown in the report, which is next point, 6.3. The action 3 is the management seek risk appetite update. This will be part of risk management improvement plans that we are working on. This plan will be presented to the SLT and ARC in March meeting, March 2024.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, Janice, you had a point, I think, that you wanted to raise.
Oh, just there was part of a resolution from last time's minutes saying that management would expand on the emergency management risk and report back to this committee.
Yeah.
How has that been done and how's that been captured?
I don't think it has, is my point, and your point. So I think we could just add that to the action list, please. That would be great. Okay, I noticed a couple of items too, if I could just check. So we've got, that's at the top of page 14, wasn't it? Management expands on emergency management risk and reports back, which would be tremendous. I also note under 6.13, this is of the last minutes, that we are hoping that Bancorp will come back to us with how our peer councils are relative to us in terms of the ratings. So if we could note that on the action list, Ahmed, please, that would be great. And I just wanted to really follow up. It's not so much an action point, but I noticed under the Audit New Zealand plan, we also discussed a letter from Waimate about downlands. That's all been cleared up. Brilliant. That's good. Thank you. So 2 items to add: the emergency management and the ascents from miles of our range of credit ratings, which would be useful. Thank you. They're tightening up around the country, so it would be useful to know where we stand, which is great. Okay, with that then, could I just, great to see most of these things closed, got a couple of matters open, and perhaps under strategic risk, keen to hear what the risk management improvement plan involves. Ahmed, it sounds like a really good thing. So that's superb. Can I move from the chair that we receive and note the action point status update? Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Scotty. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Brilliant. Right, strategic risk management update. Ahmed.
Yes, thank you. Since the previous meetings, there was 6 strategic risks that have a change in their mitigation effectiveness. So they are listed in point number 4. Some of them have changed the overall risk assessment, so from higher level to medium, for example. Others will just change in the one of either the likelihood or consequence. So the details is shown in attachment 1. So in page 28 and 29. So for example, we have a significant natural hazard. This risk number 1. So the change of the likelihood had decreased from possible to unlikely, but the risk assessment is still the same as high. Climate change the consequence have decreased from severe to major. Health and safety and well-being, the overall risk have decreased from high to medium. Legislative reform, the overall risk have decreased from high to medium. The compliance and likelihood, the compliance and liability, the likelihood have changed from possible to unlikely. And finally, the natural and built environment, the likelihood changed from likely to possible. You will have also in the table in page 28 the description of the risks as requested from previous meeting. As I've said it before, there will be a risk management improvement plan, and this will be presented to the committee in March 2024. The plan will cover the items like, for example, updating the risk policy, proper tools, training for staff, and of course the risk appetite, and improving our risk register.
Thanks, Ahmed. That's really interesting and helpful. I wonder if we have questions on the risk profile. Yeah, Michelle.
I think when it comes to risk management, it's one thing to identify the risks and manage them, but what are we doing about disaster readiness? And I'm not talking about just civil defence emergency, but what crisis management plans do we have in place, and how prepared are we should each of our risks actually occur?
This seems awfully similar to actually a follow-up on actually Janice's question, because we raised this at the last meeting, correct? You're wanting to follow through on that at this stage? Yep, okay, that's good. Somebody helps?
Kia ora, through you, Mr. Chair. I understand Mr. Cooper normally sits over that type of work in terms of business continuity planning for each business unit, and my understanding is that business continuity plans exist for the units, and perhaps Mr. Carter would like to comment further, but we're also undertaking an assessment of when there is a disaster, that we have an incident management team that operates internally within the organisation to keep it running, and that way, like with COVID, some staff were deployed to help with emergency management services, whereas internally we had to keep things working, and that depends on the incident and what it means, and SLT, the senior leadership team, will work through each incident to understand who would be the best incident manager for the internal operations, but that exists to date.
Michelle, anything else you want to follow through on?
No, that's good, thanks. I'm just, like I say, the risks are there and we can manage them. I'm more concerned about how we respond to them.
Yes, Pete.
It's through you again, Mr Chair. So the activity management plans that are prepared, many of them have a business continuity plan in them, and from time to time we get a very small snapshot of how they operate. So recently, was it the earthquake or the wind damage up at Claremont?
That was the earthquake.
It was the earthquake. So Claremont, there was an electrical failure to Claremont, so clearly a critical part of our infrastructure. The generator did click over and the supply did continue on. So we do get, in some of these, it's a very small snapshot, but we do from time to time now, or maybe increasingly, get events where our systems are tested in terms of that. But in terms of the response, if you like, and a system and a process-driven response, that is identified through our activity management plans. We also have seen, I think it's one of the key areas where the challenges exists is in our ability to continue on, because we have the architecture and our ICT systems that enable us to work when we don't have connectivity, whether that's electrical connectivity or through the internet. So the internet one is always challenging, and we know that from an event that happened in December 2019 when it went down, and we literally reverted to paper lists and going and delivering and knocking on doors for people to come. But we have a much more resilient infrastructure in terms of our ICT, being able to have people work remotely and in a dispersed environment. So we do have enhancements going on there. So I said, I think it's largely through the activity management plans that those issues are developed as to how we manage the response. As they say in emergency management, day one of the response is the same day as day one of the recovery is also is the same day as day one of the response. And in effect, the recovery has to start as soon as the response starts.
Yes, Scotty.
Thank you, Mr Chair. First of all, just with regards to the improvements on the heat map, thank you for that. Makes it slightly easier to understand, but still not a big fan of it in terms of being able to look at it and interpret what's going on there. I just wondered if I could get a little bit more clarity, please, on the risks with regards to the Natural and Built Environments Act, and the national policy statement, I should say.
Thank you. Yes, Jason Ellis. Look, I'm filling in for Paul Cooper. He's on leave this week, so my apologies. I'm not familiar with that level of information. However, going back to a previous comment in terms of the risks around performing functions while there is a disaster happening, that work is well underway with, as of last week when we had Phil Mackay still on board, so that work's well underway in terms of identifying who is and is not deemed to be appropriate, and within each unit to work within the emergency management space, as well as being able to operate BAU all at the same time. So that's, unfortunately, my apologies, about all I can add at this stage.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Just in response to natural built environment, part of the a risk there is that we are still going through our proposed district plan, and also we need to prepare what development area plans to basically control that growth in the future and make sure that it is efficient. So that work is underway, so that risk will reduce over time.
Thank you, Scotty. Appreciate your question. Any other points or comments people like to raise? Ahmed, I've got a couple. I must confess, I sense possibly with fresh eyes you have been able to bring, and I like the focus on whether our controls are effective. So if I look at page 28, my eye naturally goes to those risks where we do not have or only partially have effective controls. And so I guess my concern is actually what are we doing about the ineffective controls?
So, are you referring that to add controls and mitigations?
Look, if you look at something, so I go back to the point that Scotty's raised just about the natural built environment. We have either 4 partially, or in fact 3 no effective controls, and yet we're saying the risk has gone down. I'm trying to balance up the information here around controls which mitigate the strategic risk, and I just so my natural attention is, partly, have we got the assessment right, number one, but number two, assuming we've got it right, those are still a reasonable range of ineffective controls. What's the organisation doing about those?
For me, we have a quarterly meeting with GMs, each in their respective area, and we reassess the effectiveness of the mitigation in place for each risk. Of course, this will be a challenge going forward. This is number one. And part number two, part of the internal audit going forward would be to investigate of why is this not effectiveness. This will be part of the internal audit plan, not from this year, maybe from next year, when we have a complete risk management in place.
So one of the things that interests me here is realism in these strategic risks. Because if our strategic risks lack effectiveness, one of my critical questions will be in the long-term plan, are we resourcing to manage these risks? I sense there's a level of time stress on us to get on top of this. We don't even have a risk. I mean, this sounds like I'm being critical and I'm not, but we haven't yet. We are going to have, aren't we, a risk appetite session. It's just if these risks are really important to us, there should be a consequential impact, or we should be able to run these risks across our LTP to check that they're addressed. So I'm very interested to know and understand what are those controls that we are lacking in effectiveness, and are we addressing them to make them right? Because these risks are the biggies. These stop us achieving what we want to achieve inside our long-term plan. So I'm just interested to know what is the program to fix these? Will I leave it as a rhetorical question? Oh, hello. Will I leave this as a rhetorical question at this point? I'm just wanting to understand something has to happen, otherwise we're wasting our time.
And that was a point I was going to make. We've got mitigants that are not effective. Why would we carry on with them? Why wouldn't we just stop that mitigant? So it's just a work on, I guess, and we want to see more clarity around these. I also, Bruce, had a question. All the residual risks aren't shown on the heat map, only the ones that have moved. So it would be good to see all the residual risks on the heat map so that we actually have a picture of the risks. That's an easy fix. And I wanted to understand why the consequences went down. What changed through that? And you won't be able to answer this, Ahmed, because I think it was done out at at the group level. But what process was followed to reassess those consequences that reduced the risks? And I'm not looking at you, Ahmed, to answer. I'm looking at someone who went through that, perhaps in climate change or legislative reform.
I would add to that health and safety, by the way. I mean, this may be something for PX, but I'm struggling to believe that our residual risk in terms of consequence would be moderate. I think a drowning is more than moderate.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. There are a number of programs that sit underneath these risks, and some of them are still in development stage, so they're ineffective because they haven't been developed fully yet. And once they are, then they will move up and we will start to make headway into our risk here. And reducing of the consequences has been through some of the mitigation measures that we do have in place. Yeah, we can turn the dial a little bit and get those consequences down. Particularly in the health and safety, more controls around safe practices, birth SOPs, etc. Yeah, you can reduce the actual consequences in regard to that if you can isolate or eliminate a risk. But it is early stages, and it's a long-term program, this one.
Look, thanks to Andrew, and I think that's, this is a very effective summary, by the way, so, I mean, it's helpful, but of course, obviously, when you want to start looking at it, you do start to then want to raise the questions, and I perhaps would signal for the benefit of the committee. This is the benefit, actually, of doing deep dives, to understand what are the programs that you're working on, Andrew. So look, absolutely, I don't disagree with you or what, think nothing's happening here, but the point is, it's hard to know what is happening because all we can see here is a summary, and that's where it would be useful. So look, I take it on board that actually, if I go back to my right hand, well, my near right hand column, the partial and the not effective, you've got programs in place to work. I'm keen that we hear that and that we note that almost virtually, Jess, so that we have got some action as far as that's concerned. That's good. Did you want to say something, Treat? It looked like you were about to burst into song there when I was ranting. Okay, that's good. So look, I think we take this on advice, Bede.
To you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Janice as well. For instance, some of the programs have been, if I take health and safety, quite a significant, and you do touch wood, but there's a lot more structure around our contractor management and so on, and we've got programs in place to do that. So what we can do, if you wish, is bring back the work programs and what has been undertaken and the progress along those to give some greater insight about what has been done in those areas to achieve to reduce the risk, because we've got and again in health and safety there've been a number of initiatives undertaken that would reduce some of those risks, and some of them are programs, others of them are interventions in terms of our infrastructure. So we've fenced all our wastewater ponds, for instance, to manage that risk which has been identified. We have much more rigour around our permit training and so on, but we can bring those programs back.
Yeah, I think by improving the quality of the dashboarding and the reporting we've got here, it's generated more questions as to, and it'll be because there was such a lot of change, but I think the simple thing I was looking for was an explanation as to why, for each change, what had caused that change. So if the consequence went down, explain so that I understand. It doesn't need to be in nauseating detail, it just needs to be there's a quick reference to it so that you're not just presenting it and going, trust us, the consequences went down, I want to understand why. And that, as Bruce said, a deep dive every meeting one or two of the key risks. With a deeper dive, we'll provide more context, etc. But each time there's a change, just a simple explanation of why gives us all confidence and assurance that, yeah, this is under control and we understand.
So that's been very, very helpful. I want to stress, Archimedes, we don't disbelieve what we see in front of us, but actually we are wanting to test what is here, which is useful. I just wondered 4 things, and I also think a wee bit around what are the emerging risks, what we're playing with. Andrew, you've been public, I see, well and truly in saying cryptosporidium is not an issue for us here in Timaru, and indeed Tomato ROI need to catch up. I don't mean that critically of Tomato ROI, but we're okay, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we have informed Tomato ROI. Yeah. It was and they apologised for that other letter that came out. So that one side hadn't caught up with the other.
Yeah, look, I'm not overly worried about Tomato ROI, but it's pleasing to see your ability to be able to respond positively, that in terms of our systems, cryptosporidium is at this stage, all things being equal, not a problem, which is really superb. I did make these other notes about emerging risk when I saw the general risk profile seem to be decreasing. Can I say, in my experience, that's not true for local government, which is why probably I've been a wee bit more keen to understand why they've moved down. I think an emerging matter will be what agility we need to bring to bear inside the organisation post next Saturday. The sector is waiting to find out what will happen, and it could change the nature of what we have to do. How quickly? Don't know. You guys might have some more stronger views from your LG and Z connections as to how quickly a change in government, if it comes, may or may not move. But actually it could have some reasonable impacts on us all if, for instance, we had reform of water and we had a withdrawal of the Resource Management Act, which are a couple of things that are already being talked about. So, look, everything's speculation until Saturday. What I'm wanting to reflect from a risk perspective, from a corporate risk perspective, is actually the potential that there are more demands on us. Hello, when we're trying to get the annual report done, we're trying to get the LTP done. I'm looking down for you, Trudy, you're right in front of me. That will cause us to potentially have to react.
Bruce, is that in risk 4?
Pardon?
The legislative reform?
Well, it was, but the risk is going down. So that's when I started saying I'm not quite certain I agree with the risk assessment, sorry. Look, I'm comfortable that the broad controls, are there. What I'm trying to reflect here is the extent potential pressure on us if decisions go certain ways that we might be assuming come Saturday. And that could cause a lot of work for the sector as a whole in Timaru as well. I was also thinking, dare I say it again, and I know you only moved the consequence from severe to major for climate change, which is fine. Are we prepared for a drought? Have we got a drought coming up? I'm leaving that hanging, aren't I? Sorry, it's a rhetorical. I'll leave it as, Andrew, I'll leave it as a rhetorical question. But I mean, again, this is me trying to think around the nature of the risk profile we have, which says it's going down. But hello, we've got La Nina, and in that case, this place dries out massively, right?
We're acutely aware of the potential drought. We are in an El Nino situation, and that does happen quite.
Sorry, El Nino. I said La Nina, didn't I? El Nino. Sorry.
We're managing the water supplies. We're out there, checking leakages. We're renewing pipelines still. But we have, of course, our water restriction processes in place. When we reach certain levels, we have activation things from use water wisely to full restrictions. We are closely monitoring the situation. We are very much dependent on the weather, unfortunately, and some of the recent rain, it hasn't been much, but it all helps.
Thank you, Andrew. Look, appreciate that. And again, I just raised it a wee bit rhetorically, but also just trying to reflect that our strategic risk is also informed by what's happening. The other one, Ahmed, that probably was an assessment that I hope is true, but I had wondered was the funding strategic risk. It's assessed as medium. Going into the long-term plan is our view that we, it's moderately challenging but reasonably straightforward in terms of the LTP. That's what that says to me. We're all tickety-boo. Is that true?
Well, I think, through you, Mr Chair, and this is probably as much for the elected members, like any economics 101 is about resource scarcity and priorities, and then the appetite to increase rates and or debt, and then determine the priorities. But in terms of the delivery of our core fundamental services that we're charged with, I think that is, I don't think there's any question in terms of funding for that. There may be significant legislative hurdles emerge, as you say, caused by the election. But if I look at our core delivery of our services and activities, then I think we're fine. But in terms of capital projects that are not critical to the delivery of core functions, there may be some debate, but that's for the elected members about priorities and timeframes. Time and money, largely interchangeable in a way, and then debt and rates increases. So it depends how you frame that. If you're looking at it as a wish list that we can go and get it at 2% interest rate, then no. But if you're looking at it, can council deliver its core fundamental services, and what it generally does, and I'm not just talking water, roads and rubbish, I'm talking the libraries, Sea Bay, the museum, our regulatory functions, our civil defence, I think the answer is we're fine, yes.
Good. So look, no, thanks for that, Bede. I again am just reflecting what I'm seeing as emerging risk sector, and probably it's a wee bit unfair to say, do we have a funding risk or not? Perhaps the better question I should have asked was, are we on track with the long-term planning? And actually, any of these issues which may flow through are able to be dealt with on a timely basis. So is that a question I can look your way, Trudy, or somebody's way and say, are we on track with the long-term planning?
I would say at this point we're on track. And we've got some conversations to have with our elected members over the coming next 2 months to decide on those priorities.
Yeah, brilliant. Look, that's great, and I appreciate that. I suspect, best of all in the world, most things are challenging. Bede, you're already talking about. That's always a difficult position because generally it's in the basis of a level of constraint. I think Ahmed, going forward, the critical thing for this committee is understanding the nature of our financial strategy, not the numbers that can be dealt with by council, but the financial strategy, and actually our ability to maintain that financial strategy over the time, because that should be, meeting the conditions of a balanced budget and delivery, as you've said, Bede, etc., which become. Okay, cool. Look, thank you for that. That's probably that's all I've got to say at this stage about strategic risks. I don't know whether anybody else has got any other final comments that might have been spurred on by that. I think, Acme, what that says is I'm very keen that in terms of we've crunched down to a good summary, and as Janice, as you've said, it raises questions. There may be one or two other things that we should have in there. So Janice has suggested a wee bit of additional stuff around, particularly when there are changes and consequences, which is in addition to what's on page 29. And perhaps I'm suggesting also there could be a section in here, bullet-pointed one-liners on what are the emerging risks or risks that we're just maintaining that are outside the system. Okay, that's really good. Can we move to the resolution then, please, which is that we receive and note the strategic risk management update. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Michelle. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Brilliant. Right, Ahmed, as I suggested, well done. This is evidence of some pretty good hard work by you. We're in your hands, please, about the fraud, bribery and corruption control policy, procedures and plans. That's impressive. Thank you.
The Audit Risk Committee have previously received a fraud, bribery, and corruption control policy, procedure, and plan in the last meeting. They have, as a committee, made their own recommendations, small changes. This already have been done in the policy, procedure, and plan. I have reviewed these 3 documents and made the following changes. So the first one is for the reporting. The fraud policy have a reporting channel, and it was one of the points that have been discussed that have one reporting channel only. While the reporting should be under the protected disclosure policy, which have multiple channels for reporting. So all the reporting now, if you report any misconduct, will be under the protected disclosure policy. So this reporting section have been removed from the procedures. This one.
But can I just ask a question about the actual process of it coming under the protected disclosures? Do you mean that someone has to formally report it under the protected disclosures, or any complaint or report received will be treated under the disclosure? Because there's a subtle difference there.
So, if anyone report any misconduct, any kind of misconduct, suspected or actual, he just see anything and he want to report it. So he's going to report under the protected disclosure policy. So this is the first step. Second step is how we are going to investigate that. So if it is misconduct like misbehavior, bullying, all of this will be as people and culture misconduct. If it is something that have suspicion of fraud, this will be dealt with the fraud policy.
So if I'm working, I don't know, in one of the departments and I'm pretty low down, and I think that I've seen a fraud or bribery situation, and I mention it to my manager or to BEAD or someone, is that reporting? Because often under protected disclosures, there's a process where you have to put it in writing and da-di-da-di-da.
Yes, that will be treated as reporting, because you already contacted one of the manager, which is one of the channels under the protected disclosure policy.
Can I just check here, because I'm just and forgive me because I'm not certain. I probably have read the protected disclosure policy for Timaru, but there is the Act, which I just want to make certain that, are we using the protected disclosure phrase synonymous with the Protected Disclosure Act, which is a specific set of provisions, as in contrast to what I think you're talking about, which is more generally somebody raising a concern which should be treated confidentially until resolved?
Yeah, I'm used to protected disclosures being quite a formal process that the policies usually require you to do it in writing, and it kickstarts a whole process, which is fine for the investigation. I just wanted to understand the difference between the reporting channels, because I don't want it to be complicated for people to report. They should be able to just come and go, I think this is possibly happening, rather than having to put something in writing, blah, de, blah, de, blah.
If any staff report anything that he suspects that it is a misconduct, whatever this misconduct is, will be treated as an investigation. So if it is fraud, the fraud policy will be in place. If it is a behavior or something, so we have the disciplinary policy in place. If it is related to elected members, so we have the elected member code of conduct will be in place. So this is the process, starting from someone raise any claim or something, or disclose anything, and then the next step, how we are going to investigate this, and then we have the third step is how to report this to the ARC or to the council or to law enforcement if it is fraud.
Look, Janice, you want to
Well, I was
comment?
just going to say, do other councils do it this way? And presumably you and your senior team reviewed all this and are happy with because it has to be really simple to operate and get reporting.
Yes, that's right, and the intention is that they can report, well, to their manager, but if it is their manager that if it's their manager they suspect of the wrongdoing, then they've got to have another avenue. But that's right, what we want to do is ensure that the process is pretty straightforward, that people understand that there is a channel up, if you like, through which you can go and raise the issue, report it. And then, of course, what flows from there is that there does need, and the investigation then has to be quite carefully managed, because what if it is not? And you have to protect the reputation of the person who is alleged, because it can only be an allegation until it's investigated. And I think what we're trying to do is to make sure that while it's reasonably straightforward to initiate, it also then gets quite a structured process to protect the person against whom the allegation is made.
I agree with the investigation
So
side of it. It's just the reporting that I was wanting
Yeah,
clarity
well, I think
on.
we've encouraged through our fraud training as well that you would in the first instance go to your manager, because that's normally where you have the strongest relationship. But you do have to have an ability to go to other persons as well inside the organisation, particularly if it is your manager that you suspect of the wrongdoing. And that we're trying to create that. Now, that is in part cultural as much as procedural.
And I think the question I have on top of that be, does that mean every complaint is treated as a Protected Disclosure Act complaint? Because that formalises, because that's what I read here. I think that's the point I'm trying to get to. That formalises every complaint into quite a formal process, as you folk well know, of the Act, and that's what I'm wanting to check. Because this is the thing about different channels. It is partly about different people, but organisations looking at different channels look at these things. Is it more than, it's not just the protected disclosure. I mean, there are other ways in which these things are dealt with depending on the nature of them. That's what I think I was looking for here is, are we treating everything that is a complaint as being received under the Protected Disclosure Act? Because that is a very formal process which creates probably a level of, bureaucracy.
Just to clarify this point, the protected disclosure policy will be in compliance with the Act, so there was no contradiction. So any requirement under the Act will be reflected in the policy.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not quite certain I've got that, Ahmed, sorry. Perhaps we can take this offline. I'm just struggling a wee bit here because I'd like to look.
I'd like to go back and check with our group manager on engagement and culture, because that's the next stop when one of these issues arises, assuming they're not the party, of course. But that's the next stop as to where it goes after that, is that it goes to them they get advised on the process for us to follow. But I hear what you're saying is, does raising the issue immediately put it within the Protected Disclosure Act, and the formalities of that is what you're asking, if I understand it correctly?
Because sometimes the concerns might be really general and they're not specific enough for a protected disclosure. It might just be, I think there's something fishy in the X department and there's no allegation against anybody, so there's nothing much to protect. Yeah, I'm interested in what other councils do around this.
I mean, this is the strength of the institution of ACME. But I mean, I'm used to elsewhere, for instance, perhaps if there were concerns expressed but wanted an employment expressed, say in a tender procurement situation where person on the panel may have an interest, and for some reason it's not being looked at. To be able to raise it sensitively and confidentially with ArcMed, and for that to be reviewed at an expedient low level is a lot easier than if all of a sudden it becomes a fully Protected Disclosure Act treatment. That's what I'm trying to say about different channels. Oh, sorry, Peter. Yeah, sorry, you've probably been looking to speak for a long time. Sorry, mate.
It's all good. Yeah, it's in other places, it's you really need to know the process. So so that you have a culture where people are happy to be able to speak with someone. So in another environment, we have specified or two specified people that are seen as people who are part of a culture that people are happy to talk to and everything. It is promulgated around everyone that there is a process whereby you can go and speak to people where your details and everything are protected, and there are provisions under it. And so it doesn't need to trigger until such time as that person does actually say, effectively, I want this brought to someone's attention, but I want my details protected. And it's a question that should be asked as well in the process by a manager or leader who is subject to that type of thing. It doesn't necessarily need to trigger the Protected Disclosures Act, but in principle it starts the process until some work is done, and then you can go from there. So it's not totally and utterly so prescribed.
Thanks, Peter. That's helpful. Is Trudy?
ArcMed's just pointed out to me on page 68 of the agenda is the appendix for how an investigation process starts. So the complaints received, but using the protected disclosure policy as stated, so either by a fraud contract officer, a TDC officer, a team leader, a unit manager, what's an EC, a contractor or a volunteer. So we receive an issue, that's then preliminary investigation. It goes on a disclosures register, and then you follow that process through. So it's honouring the protected disclosures policy and allowing, dependent on the complainant, as to what level of whether they're happy to be known or not.
We're beating around the bush here. My problem is the protected disclosure policy the same as our policy for the Protected Disclosure Act, or is it with a small p and a small d? You understand what I'm saying? Point here is we should have a culture which encourages people acting with integrity. If that's what we're after, and I hope that is what we're after, you look at the various channels to raise concerns and deal with them. Raising concerns should be able in our culture to be dealt with confidentially. In certain situations, it may be relevant that the Protected Disclosure Act process is followed. I think that's the distinction that we're making, and probably I'd want to see ultimately, it's really about entry into the system. It's not, the rest follows. And I think that's the point you're making, Janice. We just need to understand, do we have a range of entry points, or do we automatically default to the Protected Disclosure, and the third word is important, Act? Because if that's the case, it's making it a lot tighter than what presumably you experience at your place, Peter. In which case, it's we are setting ourselves up for a very difficult road in encouraging people to engage with us.
Just follow up on what you're saying. So in the third week of November, there is International Fraud Awareness Week. So we are going to have some activities for this, which will cover the fraud in general and how to make any disclosure using the protected disclosure policy. So this will be the first step to introduce these two topics across the whole council. There will be sort of flyers, quizzes, some activities to raise the awareness on this topic.
That's great. I wonder,
I was just going to say, yeah, I think Mr Chair, the obvious intent is that if someone suspects fraud or corruption, misconduct, wrongdoing, that they have a channel where they feel safe and confident that they can go. And I think what we need to do is make sure that is evident and distinguish that to what is a formal disclosure under the Protected Disclosures Act, which has quite specific requirements around it, and we can look at the policy to ensure that that distinction is clearly elucidated.
Thank you. That's what I think we need. Otherwise, again, I mean, subject to other members' feelings, I'm reasonably, having gone through all of them, it makes a good response. Janice.
I was just going to say, I didn't go through all of these documents. I read the policy, the procedure and plans I didn't reread in great detail because all the changes weren't tracked from the previous versions that we read, and I thought I'm not going to sit here and reread all these again. So when there are just some changes made, I know that some of the changes were highlighted in yellow, but not all of them. So it was a case of having to read and compare. So in future, can I just ask that when there are documents coming with track changes that are of a relatively minor nature, that they're tracked rather than just highlighted so we can see what the changes are?
And look, my final question was back to, and you've already drawn our attention to page 68, which I love a diagram. You've got it down to a pretty simple point. I think the critical point here, if I've read this correctly, is I was interested whether we needed to refer any of these to a third party, such as the police. Okay, and I would presume that would come under the red diamond crime or misconduct. If it's assessed as a crime or thought to be a crime, investigation proceeds through the fraud policy. Then we give evidence, right, sorry, I missed that box there, to an enforcement agency. Brilliant. That's good. Don't know why I didn't see that. Must have been rushing. That's good. Thank you.
Bruce, one final thing. All individuals who are fraud officers or alternate fraud officers, they're required to have appropriate investigation training. Are they all going to be able to do investigations, or are there trained investigators?
So this will be depend on the cases. If you are talking about fraud investigations, if it is something that minor, so this will be conducted either by my team as internal audit, so they have capabilities. If it is something that let's say major, so we might get someone experienced in forensic to run the investigation.
So all investigators will be trained, but the fraud officers don't need to be trained investigators?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Bruce, you don't need to go and do your fraud training.
Pardon?
You don't need to go and do your investigation training.
I probably should. Yes, Scotty.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I found a couple of things in here just in terms of typos and misused words, which I'll just bring to you later on. But just looking at page 45, 9.11, with regards to council will regard all correspondence and records of correspondence as council property made during council hours or using council property. Effectively, the ability to access somebody's phone and what have you. I just wondered, have you had any legal advice around that? Because there are implications with regards to the Search and Surveillance Act where we may well be on thin ground, and I'd hate to think that written within the policy was the ability for us to ankle tap ourselves with investigation, because there are certain things, obviously, that the threshold is pretty high in terms of accessing personal information on a phone, for example.
So that's part of investigation. So if you are referring to personal phones, so for example, I have two phones here. One, this council phone. So this should be accessed by the council. This is not personal. My personal phone, yeah, you're right. There is some privacy here. So it depends on the case. So if it is major case, that's one, there will be an experienced forensic investigator and be assessing this as issues. In case of, let's say, we have to refer this thing to law enforcement, so there is no person here. They will go investigate everything. So it depends.
Yes, Pete?
Yeah, we have, it's really making sure that people are, through you, Mr. Chair, is that we don't want someone saying, well, your policy didn't enable it. The process by which we might get there will often be informed by legal advice, but we need to be able to say, you were aware under our policy that we had a right to go and obtain this information, because we don't want to run into a roadblock where they go, oh, I didn't realise that using the council computer to do this was sorry, your policy isn't clear. So it's about giving ourselves, if you like, the platform by which we can examine that, but there are rules of natural justice and legal processes that have to be observed in order for us to do it, but it's signalling that we have the right.
You okay? Good question. Okay, that's really helpful. I wonder then, Bede, in light of your earlier comment, if we just need to add a second recommendation to that which we've got on page 30. So firstly, one is that we review. Well, I think we can say we endorse, because we've done the review of the report amendments to the fraud, corruption policy, procedure and plan, and we just request a check and confirmation. How should I put it, about raising matters?
Because when I was making some notes here, maybe about the distinction between protecting disclosure as against protected disclosures under the Protected Disclosures Act.
Brilliant. Jess, how's that? You got that? Brilliant. I like that. Thank you, Bede. That is superb. We just need that check, and I think that's fair enough. Okay. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Yeah. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Peter. I'll put both the motions, and all those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you, Archmeg. That's very helpful. It's good to see the policies in place, albeit it might felt like a bit tortuous getting through us, but it's exactly your point, Bede, actually. You've got to have them in place when it happens, but equally they have to be the right policies, otherwise we struggle when it comes to a serious investigation and anger. Right, strategic insurance, Ahmed.
Strategic insurance. In January, I facilitate the insurance workshop, and in point number C, you have the summary of this workshop and the plan for the next 3 years. In June 27, the council meeting, council supports the need to move from transaction to a strategic approach. For implementing this activity, so we can identify full asset base, complete asset selection, update asset value, review business interruption cover. The risk and insurance team will help the business unit in these activities. We'll develop this workshop with the SLT and the council for the acceptance criteria for the assets. Then we have 3 categories: must insure, not nice to insure, or do not need to insure. Next step, we'll have the SLT and the council to review and challenge the categories and ensure that all the assets or critical and strategic assets that have not been missed out from the insurance. There will be a workshop for the SLT and the council to determine the degree to the type of insurance covered to be assigned to category 1 and 2. We'll review the added valuation method used in category 1 and 2, and finally review the business interpretation cover and make a recommendation of either insure, decrease, or remain the same. There will be other activities in 2024 and 2025. This will be the risk appetite analysis, understand enterprise risk framework, enterprise risk management workshops. These 3 points will be included in the risk management improvement plan.
So this probably integrates with that risk management, but insurance is only one tool of risk mitigation. So if we choose not to insure, what do we then put in place to manage that risk? And I'm not suggesting this, I'm just using it as an example, but if we decided not to insure all our motor vehicles, do we then put some money into driver training?
Through you, Mr Chair, and you're allowed to keep your microphone on all the time, Bruce, if that's easier. Those are the options, Michelle, and that's what the workshop's to discuss. Strategically, where does council want to see, whether there's some levels of self-insurance, what assets can't be insured, some assets can't be insured because of what they are, and longer term, you know, for example, it mentions if there was say for example there was a hall in the middle of nowhere and the usage was really low, how would we ensure that? And what would the expectation be of the community? Is there an expectation that everything is insured for 100% replacement value, or how does that work? So it's that strategic conversation.
Thank you, Michelle. So there's a lot of work here to get prepared for a workshop for where that sort of discussion could take place. Ahmed, the question I want to ask was and I'm conscious this is being suggested to us by insurance broker Aon, where we follow it, and I appreciate that. Equally, there is a sense to which they are suggesting quite a number of detailed points that we follow through. I think from what I read out of the paper, we're prioritising what we do because of limited resource. But does that mean the bits that are not done drop off, or do we pick those up later? So, for instance, I'm very interested in the loss limit and fire loss limit modelling is actually, from my experience, a really important part of ultimately getting to the point that Michelle's talking about a strategic insurance risk workshop and trying to work through our stuff. But at the moment, I can't see on here that we would be picking up loss limit modelling at any stage at this point. Do we go back and pick up those things, or are they not just going to be done?
So my understanding, sorry, through you, Mr Chair, is that that's in the medium term, which starts next year.
Sorry, I appreciate that, Trudy. Unless I've misread again, the papers focus on
The short
cyber
term,
risk
yes.
review, considering self-insured costs, and develop prioritisation strategy.
Yes.
The risk modelling is really important because it says actually, in the case of a standard event, we think the maximum amount of assurance we would carry for one event might be $60 million.
So would you like that included in the workshop?
Well, I think probably the answer is yes, but I think the point I'm trying to make here is just for the completeness of reporting, we have focused on some aspects of the Aon strategy, and the rest are just, I won't say ignored, but in a sense drop off. And they are also an important part of having a strategy discussion. You can still have a strategy discussion, I think, with what's planned to be done, but I'm just interested to know whether those other points drop off and we don't do it. Yeah. And I'd love to know the rationale for that. Otherwise I'm saying, why aren't we doing it?
Yeah, what I was looking for coming in, is it March next year, that it'll come back to this committee, was what the plan is and addressing those items that were recommended by Aon that haven't been picked up as to where they fit in the plan, or are we just not going to do them? Because I do recognise that, you know, insurers have a degree of self-interest in what they recommend. But this sort of work is being done in practically every organisation in the country. We're getting much more sophisticated around our insurance. But to Bruce's point, I just wanted to understand all the recommendations that they made in that plan are we choosing to ignore some, and if so, why?
And it may not actually be ignoring. It may actually just be that actually we can't do the risk modelling, we can't get it done until 25, 26. And I understand that. A lot of us have been having to make decisions on risks, shall we say, on an interim basis at this stage, because we can't get to the modelling yet. It's just to get that, what is the actual phasing for making use of what otherwise is a good strategy. Andrew?
Yeah, just when you do, of course, risk modelling and that, you need good data when you do modelling, and I think that is probably one of the limitations we've got at the moment. Is our level of data needs to improve a bit, and we are working on that through our activity management plans and asset management plans. I can think of some of the areas in my group where the data is probably not as robust as it should be.
Look, thanks, Andrew, and that's fine. You know, there we start to get the explanation, understanding about you know, come March we won't have risk modelling in front of us. We haven't got time. You guys need some time to do the risk modelling. Hello, it's going to be next round potentially. Whatever you come. I mean, I'm really just looking for the lead. What is the lead to do all the right work?
And just a point I noted in page 87 at the bottom, point 6.7, risk and it's talking about the BI cover, and just some holes that other organisations have fallen into is understanding what actually activates or triggers the BI cover and not ensuring those assets that the loss would trigger that. So just to bear that in mind when considering it.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Michelle.
Sorry, I just have another more practical question. Looking at the first point under 6 is, what is the risk to council of assets not being insured? Because I know how easy it is in a business of scale where they slip through the system, but do you have a good process in place where we're capturing all of the new assets as you go along? Because it is a worry that your first point, well, it's not a worry, it's good that you're trying to capture them all, but in my mind there's a risk that it could be a year and you haven't had an asset insured.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. One of the biggest assets, of course, is not insured is our roading network, which actually includes bridges as well. Our mitigation measure there is the fact that we are probably guaranteed to get at least some financial assistance from Whakatahi during a major event, and the bigger the event, the more financial assistance we get. And then our local share is covered through our disaster relief fund, and so we're effectively self-insuring with government assistance in those ones. So, but new assets, yeah, that they are picked up, and we, you know, as new assets are built, they are advised through our insurance registers. Yeah. It's more the older existing assets that we probably don't have too much information about, but maybe the issue.
Right, so look, the recommendation is that we just note the steps taken and would ask just management to take on board the roadmap idea, probably, I think would be the easiest way to put it, that actually says how we're going to implement the strategy line and on what timeline, because it has to be our timeline that fits us. And I think we're all big enough to recognise not all things are done at one time. The question is, what does that map or does that roadmap look like? Because actually it will give rise then to a really useful discussion. So we're going to have one in March, is that right? If I got that right, Ahmed, we're going to have our first insurance workshop in March?
Yep, we'll do the insurance in March, yes.
Brilliant, that's good. Appreciate it's going to come at a certain position, but that's about the right time given the renewal cycle that we have somewhere between June and October. Depends a bit on who you're with and how it goes, which will be really superb. So that'll be useful. Yes, Bede.
Thanks, friend, Mr. Chair. Just back to the question from Councillor Pye. Are you meaning things like we get a new motor car? Is that, yes, so we have processes for that. I was just checking with Andrew. Yeah, so we do have a pretty good, well, we think it's a pretty good process. You get a new car, that it goes onto the register and we have it covered, etc. But probably, and I was just talking to Andrew, if you take something like the water networks, they're individually assured, and the question becomes, should we have a whole network cover for that? And that's the modelling. And that's probably, I mean, you know, we haven't replaced Claremont, if you like, But should the whole of the water network be insured under one group cover, as opposed to its individual parts? And I think that's the modelling. But if, to your point, if we buy a car, do we have it? Yes. And so, yes, we think we've got pretty good policies around that, around that.
Yeah, individual assets are insured, but you're right, you can take that. What is our maximum liability if we had a major event on the network? Is the modelling work that probably needs to happen.
And that's exactly what I'm after, because it becomes really important in terms of our strategies. So that's no worry. By the way, one of the critical questions, as you know, from another local authority is actually when we sell the asset, it goes off our insurance register. But that's another issue which on there. So look, the recommendation is that we note the steps that are taken. We just ask management to take on board the various bits of conversation you've heard from us. We're obviously recognising, and I go back to your point, Michelle, this is part of our total management of our strategic risk, and we need to keep that as a comprehensive view, that this is a critical part to that, but it's in the total context. We'll have a move in a second to the recommendation. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Michelle. I'll put the motion then. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Right, Ahmed, it's a case of don't go away. Business improvement update, please. Oh no, Sam. Sorry, I thought it was. What did I think it was you, Ahmed? You can have a well-deserved breather. Thank you. G'day, Sam. How are you? In your hands. Yeah, just press the green button or the red button in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora, Mr Chair, councillors, Janice. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, that's good.
Kia ora. All right. So I'll just begin. We have the Accounts Payable Procure to Pay project. The project is underway and the Statement of Works is currently being reviewed. Atticus Bookable has now gone live, and this has been launched and has gone live, and it is transitioned into business as usual. We are also exploring other options to add to Bookable, such as banners and flags, and hire. We just have a few opportunities which can make that project bigger. And I've also been working on the Assura upgrade. All the build work has been completed. User acceptance testing is currently being completed, and we anticipate that this project will go live before the end of October. Right. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. Do you have questions for folk? Great to see projects moving through and lots of completions, which is really superb. Do you have questions? Janice, then Michelle.
Oh, Michelle, you go first.
So just with the Atticus bookable system, we kind of, you've said it's now BAU. Is there an opportunity for people when they use it to provide live feedback? Or how do we, we'll put it out there and we think it works, but how do we get from the user experience whether they think it's working or whether improvements can be made? And a second question on the same line is, when you do the event management one, are you getting input from users as you develop that, or are you going to just develop it and then put it out there?
Sure. Through you, Mr Chair. Thank you. Yes, so we are sending out feedback surveys so we can get the customers to provide feedback on their user experience, as well as we've provided an email address for people at any time for the community to provide feedback. And with regards to your second question, the events, yes, we are busy we're going to form a working group, and we're also exploring what we would like our events ticketing site to look like as we bring in the Theatre Royal.
Sam, I wondered if a business improvement project dashboard might be a simple way for us to view progress, and whether we used a red, amber, green sort of system that showed just a budget, time, scope, if you want some, if you don't have, I'm sure you have examples around, but if you don't, just email me and I can send you some. But that would just give us a snapshot of, yes, this is on time, it's green, or it's slipped slightly, it's amber. But if that's going to be a lot of work for not much benefit, that's fine, it's just a suggestion. Is there a plan for what comes next? What's on your list of business improvement things to tackle next? Is there a plan that because we're only seeing the things that are already in train?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do have a plan. I have a roadmap where we mark off what projects we would like to do, what projects we're currently working on, and working our way through that.
And have we seen that?
No.
Do we need to?
I think it would be helpful. Sorry, as long as it's not, as long as we have an understanding of the direction of travel. I think, Janice, rather than necessarily saying or getting ourselves into the operational nature of life, I don't think you intend that either. So it's really a case, Sam, if you're prepared to give us an indication of what are the future changes, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's sort of why I was saying get a dashboard. Then you'd only need to comment on the things that were off track, really.
Sounds good.
And just in terms of closeout reports,
Yes.
great that you get them. I then went, oh, are they going to come to this committee? And then I thought, it depends on the quantum and the materiality of it. So I didn't come to a conclusion on that, Bruce.
Well, my eyes go to the ones that help us strategically plan. Having said that, something like Atticus is got to be useful, particularly with the community and making full use, if I understand, of our facilities. So it's a bit hard to, perhaps we can just perhaps trial and see what comes out of it in terms of it. Sam, look, it's great to get, and as I say, see things go through. I just want to check a couple of questions, or a couple of points, because if I go to the Atticus Bookable, it says completed, but then the last bullet point says IT has raised concerns. So I think I have seen through our daily media feed that Atticus is all up and running, which is cool. I presume to all intents and purposes it is completed, but what do we do about this IT security concern? And I have a wee bit of a concern, not because of Timaru, but elsewhere. I have actually sat in a committee in the last couple of weeks where we've had to investigate a matter related to this sort of access. And I just wondered if this was really an issue or not. Have we got it completed? Are we going to deal to that?
Sure. Yes, so Mr. Chair, this has been resolved. We only left the issues just as if everybody read the report, they could see at what status, and that we have explored all the critical issues. It has been sorted and completed.
Well, I'm glad that's resolved. So just let's go over the page to Magic Q performance, which I understand is our corporate planning, really critical to our LTP. And I think it's fair to say we are using this now. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's right, okay. I wasn't quite certain what the descriptions in the project status update was. They'll mean something to you. Critical thing is that it is being used and it's effective at this stage for us in terms of clearly early days, but still important days in terms of our LTP planning, correct? Brilliant. And similar with the EasyRev, the rates modelling software, again, is dear to any accountant's heart. And I just again wanted to just have a look at something that's completed, but the critical issues, risks requiring action or help, how significant are they to the effective ongoing use of EasyRev? So we've got things like it's only been set up for GL orders and not work orders. I don't quite frankly know what that means. Testing will need to be done to ensure it will work correctly. And then it says the criteria for each model will need to be selected, da-da-da. I don't know whether those are just standard procedures when you're using this, you need to go through that, or whether this is something that's more fundamental to effective use of the system.
Yes, so Mr. Chair, this was, we just raised these again as just issues before the project, and these have all also been sorted and completed.
So these have been solved?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Sorry if I have misread it, but I couldn't quite understand the report otherwise matching completed with actually there being what looked like outstanding risks. And hey, we get to it.
Yeah,
Sorry?
Perhaps I could elaborate that a bit more.
Be helpful, yeah, unless you might have to see me afterwards for correctional reading and it says Bruce know how to read a report, but I wasn't entirely certain that they had been cleared. Yeah, any other, yes, Michelle?
Sorry, I just have some questions around the ProMap processes. I guess, for me, I don't understand how long some of those unpublished, or need to know, but like it says since its establishment, Council has documented 465 processes. So I'm just kind of wanting to get an understanding of how they flow through that system. So how long have they been on there? Like some of those unpublished, are they quite current, or have some been on there for 5 years? And when do you take them off? When do you put them on? And I see that in the last 3 months, we've only changed one thing from unpublished to published and added another one in the Chief Executive Office area. Yes, I'm trying to just get a better understanding of the data you've presented.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. So for the ProMap, this ProMap was brought into Council, I think, around 2020. So that's how long, we've been working on putting processes into the system. There hasn't been a lot of movement in the last few months, but we have again training across the units because we've had some new people start. So we're rolling out training and we're hoping to get more processes into the system.
Sorry, so do you ever take anything off there? So the published, will that just grow and grow and grow and be every single thing you've done since 2020? And what is the process to review the unpublished?
Sure. So each process has a set default review period on it, which means, each person that has created that process would need to review that within a certain amount of time. Some are set at 6 monthly or yearly, so they have changed probably since 2020. And yes.
And do you ever take the published off?
It just accumulates, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Sam? Yeah, Beat.
I think it's the question everybody's wanted the answer to, Bruce, is the difference between a GL and a work order, which Mr Dixon was going to provide us with.
Oh, okay. Do I need to know, Andrew, or will I?
Oh, yeah, it's a very technical term, yes. Basically, work orders are activities that sit under a GL. So it's just a way we can track our expenditure a little bit easier. So an understanding where it is. I
think my point, and thank you for that, Andrew. I think my point was I was interested in did it affect the effectiveness of the system as we got operating? Was it outstanding? And Sam's given me the assurance that it's not a problem, which is great. Thank you for that elucidation. Sam, was there anything you want to say about Assura? We get a chance to have a second crack at Assura when we've got Rowan under PX, but to use a phrase I've used before, it looks like it's in good progress.
Definitely, and we have about 12 modules that we've had to work through and really change and revamp from our existing system. So we're looking forward to rolling that out to the users.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. Well, if you could consider a request, well, we won't make a motion on it, but perhaps it would be good to see your total plan as to what's trying to do. That will give us some sense about the internal drive around improvement, which I don't doubt from what I've seen here, which is tremendous. So, look, could we move to the resolution, which is that we receive and note the report? Move in a second, please. Thank you, Scotty. Thank you, Janice. Appreciate that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thanks, Sam. Do appreciate that. Right. It is ArcMed this time. Internal audit report. Thank you.
Back to me again. The internal audit report. So the report have 3 sections. The first one is internal audit charter. So internal audit charter outlines the purpose, role of the internal audit activities in the Timaru District Council. The internal audit is an independent and objective assurance and advisory activities aim to add value to improve the operational controls of the council processes. The charter is an attachment 1, and it includes a new rating system focusing on the severity of the recommendation and instead of the risk by the recommendation, and it also how easy to fix this weakness, and in addition rating for the effectiveness and control in place relating to this assignment in place. The charter was presented and endorsed by the Chief Executive and Senior Council Officer in 31st of August. Second section is the internal audit plan for 23-24 updates. The 3 years plan was endorsed by our Audit Risk Committee in last meeting in 3rd of July. The first assignment, sensitive expenditures. This final report is issued in attachment 2. Just to highlight that this report covers a period from September 21 to October 22. So the findings was almost 1 year. Some of them are already actioned by the officers because there is some changes in the management in the past year. Initially, there was 5 findings. After further investigations, we end up with only 4 findings. The capital expenditures, terms of reference is signed, and Deloitte will be doing the field work, so they have already started this week. The IT and cybersecurity, this will be planned in this quarter, so will be assigned for experienced external auditor in the IT field. The asset management and waste management will be planned for 2024. The last section is the internal audit open recommendation. The internal audit recommendation, this relates only to recommendation arising from internal audit assignment, not from external auditor's work. There are 16 open internal audit recommendations, no overdue items yet. The register in attachment 3. 3 recommendations have been closed relating to the fraud and corruption gap analysis, which are implementing fraud-focused detection analysis, developing a fraud and corruption control plan, providing a reporting mechanism to report suspected or actual incident of fraud or corruption. There are 8 recommendations change the due date arising from a session of local government information management in 2022. The sensitive expenditure report have 4 recommendations, like I have already mentioned. Approval for sensitive expenditures, lack of supporting records, no update sensitive expenditure process map in ProMap system, gap analysis in sensitive expenditure policies and procedure. As I already mentioned, that the finding in this report relate to the period from September 21 till August 22.
Thank you, Ahmed. That's very helpful and very enlightening report. Folk, do we have questions? Perhaps we take it just in turn. We'll start with attachment 1, which is the charter. Thank you for that. Ahmed, I'd asked to see the charter. I think, as you quite rightly pointed out, I do have a couple of quick comments, but does anybody else have comments they'd like to make on the charter at this stage? Yes, Scotty, and then Michelle. Yeah, go for it, man. Yep, no, that's fine.
Thank you, new technology. Just with regard to audit scope number 21 on page 106, where it references consulting services, advisory related to client service activities. Is that potentially internal audit providing those services to perhaps our suppliers, or is that are we the client here, or?
Which way?
Number 22, point number 2.
Yes, sir.
It's on page 106.
21, sorry, 21, point number 2.
Oh, no, it is that one.
Says consulting services, advisory
So
and
consulting
related.
service, for example, we have the internal audit plan. We have 5 assignments this year. Okay, sometimes a manager might say, okay, can you check this process for me? I have some doubt, there's some weakness that I'm not aware of. So we can, if I have a capacity, I would say, yes, I can take this job, because it is not in the audit, in the internal audit plan, it considered a consultation, because the management requested. The internal audit function assignment should be approved by the Audit and Risk Committee or endorsed by the Audit and Risk Committee.
Yep.
Other than that, it will be considered as a consultation.
Right. So that, still not 100% clear on if that was, when I read this, I thought, is this us using your skills, for example, to help our service providers do what they do to a higher standard? And if that does relate to that at all,
Yep.
and if we did, would we be billing them for
Yeah,
that?
it could be. It could be any request for review the system, or any request that come to my unit that is not in the internal audit plan, it's considered as a consulting.
Can I just check though, Scotty? This isn't about our service providers. This is about what I presume internal audit would do internally inside the organisation. Okay, this has nothing to do, you're not anticipating working with our contractors or something like that. No, I think that's the point that, I must confess the use of the word the client is a wee bit, sort of sticks with me a wee bit. That's only because it's actually, it's all internal by its nature. Thank you. Michelle, did you have a question?
Sorry,
or comment?
just more of a general question before we dive into it. Is this, not being on council for very long, compared to other councils, would you say we're doing the right amount, not enough, too much? We seem
Of
to spend
internal audit work?
Yeah, we seem to spend a lot of time auditing it. But is that normal? Is it legislative? Or I'm just wanting to get a flavour of that.
Well, look, Janice, you may also be able to, from your public sector experience, give us a sense on that. We've spent a wee bit of time since you've come on board trying to actually ensure we have an internal auditor, if I can, and I don't mean that in a rude sense, but we've had some. And also now a chance just to check that our internal audit work is actually in the right frame, hence the look at the charter. But for essentially a risk and assurance committee, we should be devoting half our time on risk and half our time on assurance, sorry, not insurance. It will include insurance, but it's on the side, but actually assurance. So yes, for this committee, we will have a lot of Ahmed and his time looking at this. I think the critical thing that we're looking for here is that Ahmed's work is about us. Well, it's not known that our controls, those things which keep us safe, keep us clean, hygiene factors, whatever great consulting word I could throw at you, is under control. We need as governors to understand that's the case. So yes, it does mean that our diet on the agenda is pretty heavy in terms of Ahmed's work, but I think that's reasonably appropriate.
And I certainly don't have the view that we're over internally audited, and I think it's quite important that we do that, and I'm looking forward to when we do have internal audit reports coming on a regular basis in a timely manner with very few findings, that'll indicate that our policies, our processes and things are really working, because at the moment it's all a little bit needs tightening and tidying, but I think we're making progress.
Yeah, Scott.
Not the answer you wanted.
I had another question on page 107, reporting, point number 32. I just wanted to double check where it says the responsible officers shall have a maximum of 10 working days to provide written management responses and action plans. Now, I just wanted to double check, is that realistic in all cases, dependent of course on the level of risk that is identified, and therefore should it be black and white, a maximum of 10 days, if we're not going to be able to stick to it in every case?
Normally the process before going to the final report, we have a closing meeting with a responsible manager. At this meeting, we already agree on the findings, the recommendation, and what would be the proper action plan. So the 10 working days is for him to have this in writing. So to provide if there, for example, what time, resources, who will be responsible for that, all of this. But before getting to this meeting, all those findings should be discussed, presented, agreed with the management.
Well, look, a couple of comments from me. One I totally think it's a good charter, Ahmed, and Michelle, it's not that I'm just talking to you, but I mean, I think it does put internal audit in the right place, recognising I use the word quasi, and you might bristle at that, Ahmed, but that quasi-independence of our internal auditor with giving this right of access, of review, of expecting response out of the operational side of the business, which makes sense. And also Ahmed's right to talk directly with Bede as Chief Executive, and indeed us as the Risk Committee. So that's really good. It also, I would note, because we've used them as well, I looked at paragraphs 40 and 41 on page 108 to note that actually the work of internal can be supplemented by the work of internal auditors. I know that sounds slightly oxymoronic, but obviously, as we've seen with the second attachment, we've made time to time. That's really helpful. They've got some skills that I suspect supplement the work that we do. Just one probably scope question, Ahmed, and that was 19.5. It says involvement in individual tender processing evaluations except outsource internal audit activities, as these activities generally are considered operational responsibilities and may impair audit objectivity. I take it what's that saying is you will not be involved in any tender evaluation panels per se, that's an operational decision, but would you carry out any probity reviews over a live tender process? A probity review?
Covering this question, yes, it will be part of it, but currently I don't have plan how this will actually be done.
Okay, look, that's good if you can just think that one through. I mean, look, it would be, it's not abnormal, and if Andrew was here, I'm sure he'd support me by saying that often with a procurement process, you have some form of review, what I would conventionally call a probity review. People keep their conflicts of interest clean and sweet. You know, there's appropriate fairness for all tenderers, That sort of stuff would be the sort of thing that actually I would think would be valid over big ones for internal audit to be. So that's all I'm trying to raise there. So I just wanted to make certain it's clear. I agree. I don't want internal audit involved actually in the evaluation process. That's not a role for somebody that's independent. Okay, can we move to attachment
Bruce,
to...
Bruce, can I just ask
Yes.
a couple of things on the charter? Who, under council's rules, who approves the internal audit charter? Is it council? Does it have to go to council for approval now?
The internal audit charter is approved. It's by the chief executive as first person and endorsed by the audit and risk committee as second.
Okay, just to be clear on that. And when it's all these papers are referring to external auditors, I'm assuming you're meaning the statutory auditor, not third-party audits that we engage. Yep? Just say yes.
Which point I'm saying?
No. So it's Audit New Zealand. When you say external auditor, you mean Audit New Zealand?
Yeah, Audit New Zealand, because
Yeah.
Audit New Zealand is external. He's conducting
Yeah, but we also
audit.
get external parties doing audits, not even through our internal audit program, but through other areas. But that, just wanted to clarify that. I wonder if we should perhaps add in a requirement for this committee to meet with the internal auditor annually alone. I don't know.
Yep,
Some
agreed.
organisations do that.
Yep, agreed.
And I had a question as to page 108, number 45, as to why the charter has to be reviewed within 6 months of the election. Now, I know that the elections are held every 3 years, but surely the audit and risk charter shouldn't vary based on who's elected?
Yeah, because if normally when you have a new election, you might have a new councillor sitting in the Audit and Risk Committee, so it will be appropriate for them to review and see this. We have this charter that governing an important function that report to this committee.
That's them getting themselves up to speed, but hopefully it's not them being able to make any significant changes to the charter. Anyway, I'm not going to die in a ditch. I just wondered.
That's why you have
that's
independence. That's why
unusual.
you have independence on the committee, Janice.
Yeah.
Good point.
Bruce, I just had a general question around, it's on page 101, where we're talking about the IT audit, and I do hope that our Chief Information Officer isn't selecting the audit firm, that there will be some independence in that process.
They will be along later and we could re-ask that question, but I understand they have been engaged in the selection. Is that correct, Ahmed?
We already have an advertising. It will be closed next week.
But
I just think that it's good process that you don't have the person who's in charge of the department being audited selecting the auditor. Just as process.
I think that's for
It's
future.
done now, but
Yeah, it's for the future. It's a really good point, Janice. So we take that on board, Ahmed, for the future. I mean, that's somewhat like self-review. Take that on board. Can we move to attachment 2, please, which is a sensitive expenditure review? And it's slightly difficult reading when you look at the colours. As I'm wanted, but like a magpie, aren't I? I'm attracted to colours and diagrams. When you read it, it reads a wee bit on a challenging basis. Look, I would note that I think in the report you've emphasised the age of the work and indeed the change in personnel. And I think if I picked it up correctly from your presentation, Ahmed, that in fact many of the recommendations have in effect been acted on. Did I pick that up correctly?
Yes, they are. Through you, Mr Chair, I'll answer on Ahmed's behalf. We're just trying to work through things. But yes, myself, the CFO and Ahmed sat down and went through the report and went through what is in place now to resolve many of those issues that were raised, which are from some time ago.
Mm. Yes, so the corollary is that you're more comfortable that in fact if we were to do the cut today, we'd see a bit more green. Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, do we have questions? Well, actually, to be honest, can I just say I would hope on that, Trudy, if the thing that perhaps really got me worried was if I look at page 116, part of this grading is individual items of sensitive expenditure are appropriate, which after is all one of the sort of the key tests around sensitive expenditure. And, you know, we're not graded overly well there, and I'm worried if we are, to put it the other way, we are inappropriate in our expenditure. So there is a qualitative nature to this report that isn't consistent with my experience, actually, of council. Can I say that? Because I think we take it seriously, but the finding here is fairly challenging.
Through you, Mr Chair, I've seen, since I've been here, a lot more ownership and understanding of sensitive expenditure and what it means, and the Chief Executive has led that with the SLT, and I was surprised by the findings in the report, but from the work that I've seen in place, it would be very unusual to be finding sensitive expenditure that's not appropriate at TDC now.
So perhaps my final question then, Trudy, is in its nature, and I don't want to, you know, Michelle, I've got your questions ringing in my ears about do we over-audit ourselves. Would you think seriously of some form of short review to pick up the fact that these things have changed and that we can reasonably soon, I mean within 6 months, have a level of confidence that actually a full review would give us green.
I would support that, Mr Chair, and I also, just to give the committee some reassurance, is that we're going to be putting together an expenditure half an hour briefing for all staff to help them understand what not just sensitive expenditure is, but how to procure, what invoices are, what you should expect, and that I think will have a good uptake. We've found that face-to-face training makes a real difference.
Yeah, good on you. Brilliant. Okay, folk, do we have questions from anybody else? Get off. Yes, Janice. Sorry, are you okay, Janice?
One of the things is ProMap, and it says it's complex and it's going to take a long time to put in place. I'm going, really? Why? I would have thought if we're doing the training, it's important that there's a ProMap process outlined.
I'll speak to a little bit of my history with the tool, and Ahmed will speak to his history as well. So traditionally at other councils there's been some high ownership of the ProMap tool, and that rolls out, and you should expect to see, Councillor Pye, this will help in terms of, you would expect to see 2,000 to 3,000 processes in there at any one time for a council of this size. And what TDC is planning to do is work through how do we get the business units, give them the space and capacity to put those ProMaps in for those types of things, but then on the other side and that's a piece of work that's being undertaken as part of the LTP. But Ahmed will speak to how you use ProMap as a tool for risk management. I'll hand over to him.
So, ProMap have two modules. So one is the processes, which you already covered. The second module is risk management. So in risk management, you upload your risks, you have your mitigation. So normally the mitigation is a control in a process. So all you have to do is just connect the mitigation to the process already in the system. So the processes should be live, updated, up-to-date, working processes. So this is one of the plans to push ProMap to be documented for all processes of the council. This will help in the risk management area.
Bede, were you wanting to make comment?
Oh, just to add, so SLT has discussed this, and there have been a range of changes in financial delegations to group manager level to make it really clear that actually somebody at a very senior level has to be accountable, and if the group manager is on leave, it goes to the chief executive and not to an acting. So around that, when we look at it, to Trudy's point, when we look at it, we don't see evidence, and we know because we've had some reviews done around various areas, but the process itself highlights that that risk exists. So there have been changes in the delegations that mean certain areas of expenditure can only be approved by the group manager, and in their absence, the chief executive.
Thanks for that, Bede, that explanation.
But there has been discussion with SLT on this.
Yeah, groovy. Well, look, I think Trudy and Ahmed, I know it cuts across your plans, and you've got those boxes there, but I'm looking for a review. I'm not looking for a rework of the total review that was originally done, but I'm looking to see that we at least capture the changes that have been made, and that we can have some assurance that they're actually operating, which is a good transition point to when it's timely in 2 or 3 years' time for another review. So that makes sense. Okay. Is there anything about the recommendations more generally that folk would like to make? So I'm looking at pages. It's the third attachment. It's pages 128 onwards. Any questions folk would like to raise there? Probably we've had a fair thrash at them. Risk management improvement plan is a critical one to some of those issues, and I note that there are some resourcing challenges, particularly around payroll review and cash control review, and I did wonder a wee bit about that, but I was okay with where things were at generally. Any other comments folk would like to make? Yes, Michelle.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. There had been on the July schedule, there had been a recommendation arising from a Waka Kotahi audit that I didn't see here. I might have overlooked it. And I did think that previously we had reference numbers for each item, and that would be helpful if they were there, because when I want to ask about a specific thing, how am I going to tell you? I'm going to have to go page something, third one down. It's just good if they've got a reference number. And then some of them have got no dates, TBCs, presumably they're recent. I don't know why there's no dates. Yeah, I've got some other minor things, but they're minor.
Thanks. Yes, your general question, Michelle.
Sorry, my general question was around culture, and given that the risk or the internal audit position is probably not the most favourite position in council, what do we do around culture to ensure that that person is supported in their role and their well-being?
Through you, Mr Chair. So Ahmed is part of a wider team which provides that additional support, and the way that he works with a unit manager is never to work with them to make them feel that their work is undervalued or that they're doing the wrong thing. It's about he comes from a place of, I want to make sure you're doing this is best practice, that I'm able to support you to do your very best. So this is a journey that he's taking us on, and he has worked alongside me and advised that he wants to work closely with SLT and the new chief executive for them to understand his role and their part they play in the conversation, because like anything from a culture, it's leading leadership by all rather than just one person. But I know that part of the role that I'm currently in at the moment is supporting that person, and they're valued as part of the wider team.
It's a good question, Michelle, and it comes down to both the performance of the internal auditor but also the cultural acceptance across the organisation, particularly with SLT, that self-review's good. By the way, self-review's better than external review, isn't it, Dee? But I think we should see it as a positive on the whole, and that's really superb. Can we move to the recommendations, please, which is we receive and endorse the internal audit charter, that we receive and note the internal audit report, I think we should say into sensitive expenditure, and request a short follow-up within 6 months' time. And request a short follow-up within 6 months' time, Jess. And we receive and note the internal audit open recommendations. There's some referencing that Janice has made in terms of actually the ease of access to it, but I won't make it a resolution. I'll suggest that you just take that one on advice, please. So there are 3 recommendations there. I'll move that from the chair to over sector, please. Thank you, Nigel. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. How are we going, guys? We've got to get ourselves, we're going to jump over 6.8 to 6.9 and 10 and 11. Do folk need a break for 5 minutes? Check their phones, toilet stop. Are we okay? Keep beavering away? You do with the coffee? Good do with the coffee? Fine. Let's take a break. It's going to be 10 minutes, quite frankly. So 5 past. I'm going to get you back in here. Thank you. pick up again. And I think we're still online for 11:30 with John Trudy, if you want to give him that text. Okay. G'day. Procurement.
I'm
You've
here.
been waiting around, thank you.
No
Your
worries.
hands, Nigel. In your hands. Anything, comment you'd like to make?
No, just this is my first foray into local government. I'm enjoying it so far.
Good.
There's certainly a lot of building blocks that were identified in the audit findings, and I'm building a profile across the organisation with a lot of the group managers, a lot of the subject matter experts to develop all of that. So the plans at the moment are a little in the summary stage at this point, but policy is due this month, and the procurement manual itself is due for review in February, March of next year.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it, Nigel, and welcome to the team. Looks like from the report, 10 July you started.
That's the one.
Good on you, great. Brilliant, it's good to have you on board. Folk, do we have questions for Nigel in terms of the broader process? We've asked for this, Nigel, because our ongoing recommendations from both internal audit and particularly external audit have been to pick up the pace in terms of procurement, and we are keen for obvious reasons, so it's been good to get this update regularly to the committee. So, committee members, do we have questions for Nigel at this point? Yes, Michelle, then Scotty.
Sorry, forgive me if this is in here, I did read it yesterday, but in your procurement policy, do you have plans to have something around climate change in your procurement decisions?
Part of the work I do here, Councillor Pye, is working with Rhys Thomas with sustainability. He and my daughter are also on the South Canterbury Eco Centre committee and a couple of other activities. So my daughter is an extreme environmentalist, which is great, but I'm also building into the health and safety criteria as well. So we'll be matching our requirements to our suppliers and educating them in the processes as well.
Scott.
That's all right. You can read my notes if you like. There's a bit of highlighting. The implementation of the process for reporting of contracts due to expire, those
Correct.
within at least next 8 weeks. Is that an industry standard? Is that long enough, noting that some contracts might need to change and be revisited and what have you?
Part of the process is, from my point of view, in the commercial world, is that that's generally about right. In the local government world, we probably need, given the plethora of committees, etc., we probably need to extend that out a little bit. So this is a review process, but effectively, what's significantly lacking is that contract management process within the organisation. I'm working with the authority team, our ERP system, to look at investigating the contract management package that we did not implement when we put the authority system in place. So we're working with them to develop that and see where that leads us. But definitely it's a lack, really. There isn't at the moment.
Thank you for that answer. Anybody else want to make questions, Janice? Okay. I take it, and indeed I think you just get it up for it. Procurement policy coming. The manual is 2024, and you've talked early 2024, and I think you've just spoken with Scotty about the contract manual and register, which is, there is technically an application through authority already, but you're trying to establish where that's going. And on top of that, I think I noticed on here, the reporting side is something which you've got on hold, but you'll pick up as well, the dashboard situation.
Most definitely, yeah. I'm working with Brad Reeve in our information technology department, looking at adding some different or additional reporting criteria within the ERP system so that we're able to present supplier categories and subcategories for the work that they carry out, so we can give more dynamic reporting on questions asked and things like that. Right. So, and we can target that spend leverage as well. So yeah, working hard with stretching the IT system as far as I can always do in organisations.
Well, push them along, Nigel. I think that's these are, I mean, we are after all talking about the fundamentals of good procurement, not even, you know, the niceties. It's about getting the base ones. So I'm very keen to monitor and encourage and support you as terms of the work you've got to do here. No other questions? Can I move to the recommendation, which is that we receive and note Nigel's report? Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Janice. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thanks, Nigel. Appreciate that, man. Good, quick report.
Thanks for being so gentle with me on my first
You
time.
probably were sitting there thinking, gosh, what are these going to say when we get there, eh? Rightio. If we can move to sense of expenditure. Is Andrea, Andrea, I've noticed you've been hiding behind there, and I'm always keen people are up at the front here. So, Andrea, this may not be the biggest thing on your plate, given everything, good things that you're doing around the annual report, but look, open to any comments you want to make before I throw up to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report is now our standard quarterly report, working obviously with ArcMed in regards to the recommendations, so making sure that we have strict processes in place when it comes to sensitive expenditure. So just essentially a list of the last 3 months. I don't think there's really too much on there that is of concern.
Great, thank you. Right, is there questions? And I mean, our role, as I probably mentioned to most committees when we do this, is it's about the reasonableness. That's why I focused on the appropriateness and the sense of expenditure report. So it's a sense to actually, have we got our bearings right? Does this all make sense to you? Any comments folk would like to make?
Bruce, I wondered if this level of detail is needed at this committee, but not a problem to see it, but I would be looking more for perhaps a certification by management that they'd reviewed the sensitive expenditure and considered it appropriate and reported any breaches. But if this is a simpler way of doing it and we just review it, then that's fine.
I would probably like both, actually. I like your idea of there being an assertion that there has been no breach. My assumption is that it's here because there is no breach, but actually to have the positive statement would actually be reasonably useful. I do think it is important that actually we, as a public sector organisation, get the chance just to review it, but it can only be for appropriateness, because I assume this has all come here because it has gone through appropriate controls. So it's really that retrospective look more than anything else. Any other questions or comments from folk? I think I'm okay, sorry. There's always, probably I do have questions, but would I ask them? Probably.
Can I note just one thing?
Yeah, sure.
That, for example, the Station Cafe Citizen Ceremony tea, there is actually a number lumped together within that figure. So it's not essentially a one-off expenditure. So looking for feedback whether or not actually all of them, you would prefer them to be all listed, or whether or not summing them together is okay.
Sorry, which one is that for the
So,
station?
well, for
1066.
example, Station Cafe or Sophie's Catering and Mrs M's, they look large in themselves, but are actually numerous. No.
I think what's reasonably important to me, and I mean, thank you for that. That's actually really helpful stuff, because I mean, your eye's naturally attracted to where the larger numbers are, and so I'm trying to match that with actually what is the right-hand column, because that's the description of why we, you know, it really should detail the business purpose for why we have committed this expenditure, and that's really all I'm interested. So the fact that actually this is multiple purchases rather than necessarily one is helpful, but equally the business purpose will stacks up B.
Yeah, and on some of that, if it's like for citizenship ceremony, we get some money reimbursed as well. So it's not all just dispersed. Some comes from DIA, is it? DIA to
Yeah.
fund it. Yeah. Yeah. So some of that expenditure which relates to the citizenship portion gets reimbursed.
Okay, I think looking at it does reflect the nature of the community nature of a council in terms of events and the nature of it. So, you know, I mean, I think really just checking that. I don't sense anybody's particularly vexed by this. Take on board Janice's point, Andrea. Would be useful if there was a, shall we say, I think there isn't one here, a positive statement that actually all controls have worked. There is no exception. That would be helpful. I think it's useful we just spend 5 minutes, I don't propose any more, on it, so that we would go to the recommendation that we receive and note the sensitive expenditure report. Do I have a mover in a second, please? Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Peter. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those that are against, it's carried. Okay, Ahmed, a really important report for me, believe it or not. I've taken some interest in this report. Perhaps that's a warning. If only because we're coming up to, on the 24th and the 31st, adopting our annual report. And the auditor will ask out of us for a letter of representation, which is signed not by me, but by Nigel and Bede. Amongst it will be that actually we have complied with the law. So this, as a creature of statute, becomes a really important point. This is a good time to receive the report, so well done. So I have taken a lot of interest actually in the qualitative nature of the information. So Ahmed, with those opening comments, would you like to raise any sort of key points, and then I'll invite folk to make questions.
Legislative compliance are, we use a comply with survey from mid-July to early August, covering the period from 1st of July 2022 till 30th of June 2023. This year we have 100% completion rate compared to last year. One of the reasons for having this high percentage is that this year we focus on the chief executive, group manager, business unit managers, and team leaders only, and instead of having more individual like last year. So compared from last year, we have 90 last year. This year we have 54 only person have been in this survey. Last year we have a rate of 83%. This year we have 100%. And the response completed, last year we have 1,975, that's 79% completion. This year we have 2,244 response, which represent 100%. The distribution of the results, we have 71% in full compliance, 3% partially, and 2 items which almost 0% for zero compliance. You can find these 2 items in the attachment in page 203. They are relating to engagement and culture, so child protection policy and protective disclosure policy. We have 26% that did not arise or is not applicable to us. We are going to work with a survey response to make sure there is action plans that covers partial and zero compliance.
Thank you, Ahmed. Do you have questions for Ahmed or staff that are here?
Ahmed, thank you for the report, and I always look at these comply with reviews carefully. It was useful to see the areas of non-compliance, the actual items where there was only partial or zero compliance, but what I'm looking for is the next stage as to why there were areas of only partial compliance, what the actual issues were, why there was zero compliance, etc. And that wasn't obvious from here. It just went, these are the areas that aren't compliant, and I'm looking for the next step.
Yeah, so look, a number of those were areas where, through you, Mr Chair, where I answered. And in the comply with, you have an action plan. And the challenge I had was that if I look over the area, I couldn't guarantee on every single instance that we had gone there that we were compliant. I wasn't necessarily aware of non-compliance. If you take something like asbestos, for instance, can I guarantee that on every single building and every single site, while I know we have an asbestos management plan, while I know there are processes, while we have approved contractors, our challenge is a system that enables us to say with assurance everything is covered. And I don't want to be putting in an answer. And so what you had therefore is the binary nature. Now, what it led me to believe is, to your question, is what, Janice, is that the next step is, how do we build positive assurance into our processes and our systems? So that is for a good deal of it.
That's often the nature of the partial compliance, and what I often see in such reports is that there has been an initial inquiry made and it's because there couldn't be complete, just as you've explained, just an outline of that, and that we'll later on see plans to provide more positive assurance. But this was completely silent as to why, whether it was one person that noted the partial compliances, etc. It was just to give a little bit of context about the initial inquiry as to, oh God, why have we got all these non-compliances or partial compliances? You get them, and that's not the issue. It's understanding why they're there.
And we can add that, because when you can fill out the comply with, that is in the actual report, so we can provide that readily as part of the reporting because it is there.
Look, and Janice, I think you've cracked probably the key question, and B, that is, I mean, I don't think we want to see the whole, again, I've argued detail, and now I'm arguing not detail, but it's actually, it's almost naturally like I mean, I've been going through this, oh, gee, asbestos, gee, hazards, and I'm just wondering whether at the higher level there was a response there. And look, I take on board your response, really effective. I understand that. And I mean, I was even wondering when I read this, gosh, do we not even know where the asbestos is? Do we not have an asbestos plan? And you're saying, well, yes, we do. I hear your point. It's about its application that is the challenge. So that would be useful to have that sort of thing, because when I got over to things like the Local Government Act under infrastructure, where we said council must make sure its decisions using the correct processes, sections 15 to 76 Local Government Act, and I thought, gee, surely we, all things being equal, the answer must be yes, we are compliant, but we're saying only partial compliance. Now the question is that because we know we haven't complied in all cases, or is it just that we're uncertain?
It's basically uncertain. More to the point, we don't have concrete evidence to say that we are complying. So we believe we are, but in an audit situation, you do have to have evidence, and that's what's lacking at the moment, that documentation.
Okay. Yes, Trudy.
Through you, Mr Chair, the survey is as you say, quantitative. I think the work that the risk and assurance team can do is to do those checks to check that we are complying as well in the longer term with the various statutory requirements, because we also have to acknowledge that with the push of a button, someone could say we're not compliant when they made a mistake, because it's quite a lengthy survey as a user.
Oh, look, I'm really grateful, Trudy, that we are going to the effort of this. This was, I think, the first place I saw the comply results, and I found the power of the reporting was really good. But it does, of course, raise the questions you've got to ask. So I must confess I then go to the zero compliance. And perhaps it's slightly ironic given the time we devoted to protected disclosures, but we're saying we have got zero compliance with the Protected Disclosure Act. That's what we're saying here.
Yeah.
Are we?
Yeah.
I thought we had it under control.
Yeah, at the time of the survey, the protected disclosure policy was not drafted. So currently it is in draft form. There's a pipeline for the SLT to be approved.
So zero compliance because we didn't have the internal procedures in place.
We could have handled a protected disclosure, even if it was informally, yeah. Okay, look, it's just no big drama. Again, here's the key point. You know, I got quite worried when I read saying, oh, gee whiz. But actually, the point is there is some qualitative information here that we have got an approach in train, which actually makes sense. So that's good. I mean, look, given I'm finance background, I still then look at something like the Children's Act and think, gosh, what's the story here? This must be important for our swimming pools and bits and pieces, and I wonder about that. So again, there's probably a background to that says either we don't, you know, it's back to we do have the policy but don't have the confidence it's implemented, or something's in development. Again, you come back to that qualitative question about what could or should be there. Rightio, any other questions from folk?
Are we getting John on now?
He must be close to coming on board because he's next lined up. How?
Okay. If we were having a brief discussion before he got here, but... No, we won't. Okay, so look, that's helpful. Can I just say that on the 24th, as a committee, we'll come back to the letter of representation, part of which, as I've said, is that we will statutorily comply. Could I just ask that you think through the inevitable question from your chair, are we okay to let Nigel and Bede sign? And just think about some of that qualitative nature of what we're talking about here would be great. Useful report. So, look, I'm going to move from the chair that we note the we receive and that's the central report. Sorry, we receive and note the legislative compliance report. I'll move that from the chair. Over a seconder, please. Thank you, Nigel. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those that are against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Right. Good morning, John. How are you?
Good, thanks, Bruce. Yourself?
Good, thank you, John. Appreciate that, and it's good to have you here. So, look, we're dealing here with last year's, so to speak, pretty historical, but important that we go through the process. Annual audits, findings, plus also the outstanding audit items. I think that's correct, Ahmed. So if you want to lead off, I can then invite John to make any comments he wants to. So I think we deal with that aspect first. I think it's also important that we pick up and have a very quick discussion on audit progress as well, seeing we've got John on board. I hope that's okay, Andrea. But let's deal with the recommendations from last year first. Ahmed, in your hands, if there's anything you want to say.
For the external auditor open recommendation, in total we have 22 open recommendations. They are in attachment 1. 6 recommendations from previous audit news and management report have been completed since our last audit and risk committee meeting. These are marked as completed in the attached records. There have been 6 new recommendations arising from audit news and management report for 21-22. The full report is in attachment 2. The 6 recommendations are improve valuation condition information, implement the evaluation improvement recommendation, year-end accrual cutoff procedures, goods and service tax, investment, development, contribution policy. And you have the attachment 1 and 2.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. So those are on pages through 139 before we get to John's report on last year. John, is there any sort of short comment you'd like to make about your closeout report for last year's audit, please?
Right. The good news was we issued an unmodified opinion. Audit New Zealand owned the fact that the audit was completed late. It's important for the committee to note on page 146 of your papers where it's got the uncorrected misstatements. We at the bottom of the table there, it talks about the there's a paragraph, there's a sentence under, no, there's a paragraph under the table where it just talks about the net effect when you take into account the prior year's unadjusted misstatement. So it's when people talk about materiality, it's important to note that if you have an unadjusted misstatement, it impacts onto the next year. So, because one of my clients got caught with a misstatement in the current year wasn't material, but when it's accumulated with one from the previous year, it was. So, yeah. So we cover off in there that there was, that the process didn't work as well as any of us wanted it to work, but we've made some, there's been significant improvements for this for the current process. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. That's good and short. So, folk, do we have questions here for John? Bearing in mind we're dealing with last year's audit, and I think, John, you already hinted that this year is going better, which is good news. Folk, do we have questions for John at this stage? No? It's all going to be accepted. Great. John, probably a couple of things. Firstly, thank you for the assurance that we can take from your work. I have, and I've got to find it now, sorry, read with interest some of your comments about, on page 150, the assessment of our controls. And I would note on page 157, paragraph 5.1, and I'm saying this as much to the benefit of the committee, we consider that a culture of honesty and ethical behaviour has been created. That's here in Timaru District. That's, as a chair, really important for me to read. There's also a comment under the public sector audit on the following page 158. There are no instances of any of the above items, and they tend to be performance, waste and probity. Items that came to our attention during the audit. And I have to notice Nigel and Bede specifically said they looked at your expenditure. Given I signed it off, I'm quite glad that there was no problems there. So otherwise I could be for the high jump. So there are some important points here to take out of John's stuff, not just the positive assurance over the annual report, but actually about the way we're operating. I'd like us as a committee to recognise that. Firstly, thank you, Bede. A lot of that's down to what you're trying to create internally, but also Nigel, thank you, because of, a culture of honesty and ethical behaviour starts at council, not just with. So that's good that we have got that in place, and that's important context to then start to think about actually the nature of the recommendations. Look, the recommendations focus pretty much and strongly around particularly our annual report. Andrea, Trudy, Ahmed, is there any particular issues with these recommendations? We've got your response. It seems to be that actually they're accepted. We're just moving on those and we will follow those through the normal course, correct? Brilliant. John, there is one other point which obviously, if you're going to do it, it needs to be solved quickly, please. I understand it would seem that you are going to seek to bill us extra for this audit. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, well, I think that needs to be done very quick. If I can ask for that, please, John. I hear you talk about some of the challenges that you've had, so I would be expecting a pretty healthy reduction in your increase fee if that is going to be the case. It did, quite frankly, put us into significant strife to go late, and we've accepted your comments that it was, that you have taken it on the nose, and I agree. It makes it very difficult for me to understand how much more we should really pay as a result. But it needs to be solved quickly, bearing in mind that I think at the next meeting we're going to be expecting, well, I think we've even got the current year's fees solved, and we're going to get the LTP fees. So we've got to get these ones nailed. Correctly?
Yeah, to you, Mr. Chair. The Mayor and I have a meeting with John and I think is it Stephen Walker, John, on Wednesday.
Yes.
for the current year.
Oh, this Wednesday. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that's
Good. On this particular issue here, last year's
I think
fees?
it was the 2023 one, wasn't it, John? We were meeting.
Yes, and you were going to talk with the mayor on his return about the additional fee recovery for the 22 audit.
John,
Correct.
I think the critical thing here, if I can just leave it as an open, thank you for that, Bede, as an open comment, is I'm very thrilled to hear that even your short comment that things are going much better this year, but the relationship sours if we can't get the fee thing right. It destroys all goodwill. So we've got to nail this, and I've got to say we need to get this nailed. I'm looking at you, John, by the way, not at Nigel and Bede, particularly even given last year's audit, which is now 15 months away. You know, we still potentially have a difference in views over how much we should pay for the actual audit. We need to solve that. With that, is there any other questions people like to raise? Michelle?
I just have some questions for the council officers as opposed to John. Could you just remind me why we changed from SL to DV in depreciation? And I note that there's still some issues there with the depreciation of the assets, and what the plan is to get that sorted before we head into the long-term plan, please.
You can comment on that, please.
Yeah, look, on the reason for the change to straight line as opposed from diminishing value, a couple of reasons really. I think straight line better enables us to better map the life and the utility of the asset, and it also enables better management of the assets on the register, because there is a point at which the asset actually ceases to have value, whereas if you go to diminishing value, you've got something that's down at sort of $2.50, and it might have started out years and years ago way above that. So there's a couple of reasons, but primarily depreciation is really the consumption, there's a recognition of the consumption of the asset, and we believe that straight line better represents that consumption.
Oh, look, I think I'd stand corrected by John, but I'd struggle to think of another local authority that uses DV. There was I think I said this to Bede earlier this morning, there was a contrarian view held by Timaru District many years ago over valuations and depreciation in particular. I fully support, from an economic perspective, the movement to straight line. And obviously that's had some challenges to implement that last year. I'm correct in saying, I mean, that was sitting around the table, that being spoken about. So I think we've got that one resolved, correct? Yeah, for this year.
So sorry, and the second part of my question, which is, will we have this resolved as we head into the LTP?
Yep.
Report suggests there's further work to do.
Yeah, on economic lives, yeah.
Yeah, so as part of this year's audit, we've done a review of the lives of the assets, so then that'll be taken into consideration. So from the LTP going forward, yes, definitely. Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle. Were there other questions? You're welcome to ask them. You okay? Radio. That's brilliant. Thank you for that, Michelle, because that actually probably were the critical recommendations, because they go right back to 2019 in terms of the way John's report's written and our recommendations have come through. So it's important that we've got those ones nailed, which is really important. Right. Is it fair just to ask, Trudy, you can tell me, I've done this without fair warning, can we just have a quick discussion? I've heard the overall comment that things are going okay with the current audit. Is there anything we need to discuss with John? I'm bearing in mind I'm in public about this, about the challenges of getting through the audit this year. We're still trucking through okay. 24th, as I said, October, 31 October sign.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is our aim, and we are working closely with John and his teams to ensure that occurs.
John, I give you a chance to respond. Look, you may want to amplify. You said things are going well. What's making it go well this year?
So we're working with Trudy and Andrea and Andrew in terms of dealing with the issues. Our commitment is that you achieve the statutory deadline, whether so it's the end of the month, not necessarily the 24th. There are some challenges, and I've sent you through an updated email on those. So whether you want to discuss those in the open meeting, I'm not sure.
Not at this stage, John. We can save that till later. I was keen we focus on the positive because it sounded like things were positive at this stage. So I think we can leave that there at this stage. Rightio. Can we just go to the recommendation then, please, which is that if we get this right, we receive and note the outstanding recommendations register update. And I think it should add to that, Jess, sorry. It's another one of these ones I should have got to you last night. And Audit New Zealand's report on the audit of the District Council for the year ended 30 June 2022. I'll move that. Do we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Nigel. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Now, if my sharing has gone right, we are actually nearly at the end of public. I've had no notice of urgent business or nature of minor matters. So that does mean that we do move to the motion to move into public excluded. I'll move from the chair for the reasons that are outlined that we do so. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Nigel. I always like to pause. Is there any particular comment folk would like to make on what we're about to do? Happy that it all goes to public excluded. Any comments? There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you. I thought actually, I know we've only just had a break, but I understand that we might have lunch